Welcome back to the deep dive, where we tear through the source material, ignore the noise, and get straight to the critical intelligence you need to understand the biggest stories in football.
Hello again.
Now, if you follow the Premier League or, any global sport really, you know that the focus almost always rests on the 90 minutes of action.
The match itself.
Exactly.
Yeah,
But today, we are completely changing the angle. We're looking under the bonnet.
that's right. Because when you talk about institutional transformation in modern football,
Mm-hmm.
no operation is under a more intense, almost suffocating spotlight than Manchester United right now.
Absolutely.
The performances on the pitch lately have driven the conversation to absolute extremes, but those extremes are often just symptoms of deeper structural problems.
Precisely. And that's our mission today. We are not going to analyze the last tackle or the last goal. We are diving deep into the infrastructure, the critical foundations being laid behind the scenes at Old Trafford. We've stacked up reports from across the industry, and we've coupled that with an incredible volume of raw, often brutal fan commentary from places like Reddit forums, detailing a major senior appointment in the recruitment department.
And this is where the club's future is truly being designed. This isn't a quick fix signing. This is about appointing the engineers who will hopefully build a sustainable modern machine.
So what's the big news?
The big news we are dissecting is the appointment of Kyle Macaulay, he's 39, as Manchester United's new head of senior scouting.
And the moment this news broke, the reaction was, well, it was immediate, it was complex, and incredibly polarized.
Oh, absolutely.
The introduction of Macaulay into the structure, it signals a very specific new path for the club, aligning with the new leadership's mandate. But as we'll see from the sources, the fan base is already deeply suspicious.
So what here is massive for you, the listener? If you are interested in how a multi-billion-pound enterprise attempts a radical pivot after years of failure, this appointment serves as a perfect microcosm. We are examining one of the key new hires brought in to fix the mechanics of an engine that has been sputtering for over a decade. You can't fix the performance until you fix the hiring process, and United are at least trying to overhaul that process right now.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the hard details of the appointment itself. So Kyle Macaulay is appointed head of senior scouting for Manchester United. He's described as well-regarded Scot. He's 39, and he slides immediately into a critical, redefined layer of the new hierarchy.
And the reporting structure here is vital. It's absolutely crucial because it defines the club's operating philosophy going forward.
How so?
Well, Macaulay reports directly to Christopher Vivell, who is understood to be the head of recruitment, or perhaps the director of football, depending on how the club titles the roles internally.
So he's not an independent operator?
Not at all. This makes Macaulay a central lieutenant in Vivell's strategic operation.
Now, this raises a crucial question for anyone who hasn't been immersed in the intricacies of modern football bureaucracy. If Vivell is the director of football, the architect setting the high-level blueprint.
The big picture guy.
The big picture guy, exactly. Let's say he identifies that United needs a new defensive midfielder, a number 6 with certain characteristics. What functionally does the head of senior scouting actually do day to day? What's the practical difference?
That's a great question, and it's essential for understanding the structural change you're trying to make. Think of Vivell as the portfolio manager.
Okay.
He handles the budget allocation, the strategic market focus. So, for example, we need to focus 60% of our scouting resources on South America this quarter. And ultimately, he has the final sign-off on negotiations.
Right, the final say.
Macaulay, as the head of senior scouting, is the pipeline manager.
The pipeline manager, I like that. That's a helpful distinction.
Absolutely. Macaulay is responsible for overseeing the entire network of senior scouts globally. His duties involve ensuring that the scouts are deployed efficiently, that the data aggregated on potential first-team talent is accurate and standardized.
So he manages the information flow.
Exactly. And most importantly, his job is to filter that massive ocean of potential names down to a highly vetted shortlist that fits the specific profiles Vivell has requested. He presents the best 3 or 4 names for Vivell and the manager to ultimately decide upon.
So it's a foundational operational role focused on discovery and that initial vetting.
It's a bottom line.
And we know this appointment didn't just happen randomly. The sources confirm it's part of a massive ongoing overhaul. United used external consultants, the Sportsology Group, to help find and vet candidates for this role. Now, why does a club the size of Manchester United need to hire consultants to find a head of scouting? I mean, doesn't that imply a critical lack of internal expertise?
It implies exactly that, but it also signals a commitment to genuine external best practice, which is why they're being retained. The Sportsology Group, they specialize in building high-performance sports organizations.
So they're basically admitting the old way was broken.
They are. When United engaged them, they essentially admitted our internal processes for vetting and recruiting executive staff are broken. Sportsology provides an unbiased global perspective. They use proprietary metrics and network connections to identify talent that might not naturally surface through the traditional old boys club networks.
So using Sportsology is an admission of failure in the past, but also a signal of intent for the future. They are trying to bypass those potentially compromised networks and bring in genuinely fresh expertise.
Precisely. They are trying to establish a meritocratic infrastructure. And that infrastructure starts with the man Macaulay reports to, Christopher Vivell.
Yeah.
We need to look closely at Vivell's pedigree because it fundamentally dictates the strategic direction Macaulay will follow. Vivell is a product of the Red Bull system, Salzburg, then Leipzig, before his controversial short stint at Chelsea.
That's fascinating. I mean, the Red Bull system is famous for being utterly ruthless and data-driven when it comes to talent acquisition. They're all about young, high-potential players they can develop and sell for massive profit.
It's the ultimate Moneyball approach in European football, really. Vivell's experience means he prioritizes specific attributes: athleticism, versatility, and mental toughness, often over star power or, reputation.
So this is a huge strategic pivot.
A crucial one. His presence means Macaulay's scouting efforts will be driven by rigorous data models, moving away from subjective reports or a manager's immediate short-term preference. It's a move towards asset accumulation.
Okay. Now that we understand the strategic importance of the role in the new infrastructure, let's jump straight to the emotional core of the reaction. Because despite this being a high-level technical hire, exactly the kind of structural change fans have demanded for years, the immediate commentary is just steeped in cynicism.
It's not just cynicism, it's exhaustion. Complete and utter exhaustion. The sources provide those two immediate, devastatingly cynical questions from fans upon hearing the news about Macaulay.
What were they?
One asked, is he any good at wingback?
Oof.
And the other, arguably the most telling indictment of the current state of affairs, can he make a simple 5-yard pass?
That quote, can he make a simple 5-yard pass? That is brutal. It's brutal because the fan is completely sidestepping the complex structural reform and linking this off-field hire directly to catastrophic on-pitch basics.
It is the ultimate psychological barometer of the fan base's current mood. It tells us that fans are so utterly disillusioned with the fundamental skill deficiencies they are seeing, the constant misplaced passes, the lack of spatial awareness, that they instantly assume any new hire, no matter how specialized or high level, is useless if the 11 players on the pitch cannot execute the basics of the game.
They're essentially saying, we don't need a new head of scouting. We need players who know how to play football and a system to teach them.
Exactly that.
And that deep distrust, it feeds directly into the crisis mode theory that we found in the sources. This structural news isn't seen as genuine progress. It's viewed as a necessary distraction.
100%. The narrative among a large section of the supporters is that the board only announces a director of talent identification or a head of global strategy when the first team has just suffered a humiliating defeat.
It's a PR move.
It's a mechanism to signal to the market and to the shareholders that action is being taken. Fans are saying they couldn't give a damn about the titles. They only care about wins and coherent football.
So they see the structural change not as a foundation for future success, but as a crisis management tactic, a way to buy the current regime more time.
That's the feeling. So
Wow.
Macaulay is walking into an environment where half the fan base views his appointment not as an opportunity to fix things, but as a calculated public relations maneuver designed to paper over the cracks.
It's an almost impossible starting point.
It is. And the only way to break that cycle of distrust is through results. And those results depend entirely on the players Macaulay identifies and the system they are put into.
Okay, let's move beyond the structural context and look at the man himself. Kyle Macaulay's CV is essential here because it gives us multiple contradictory data points.
Hmm.
It spans some of the most successful and, well, some of the most debated recruitment departments in the Premier League.
His career trajectory allows us to view him through three very different lenses. You've got the undisputed success story of Brighton, the chaotic high-spending spree of Chelsea, and the institutional instability of West Ham.
Right, and understanding these contexts is vital to judging his potential impact at United.
Absolutely.
He has spent the majority of the last 6 years across Brighton and Chelsea and is widely described as a highly rated young guy. Let's start with Brighton. If United are truly looking to modernize, what specific insights could Macaulay bring from the Sussex coast?
This is, I think, the most compelling argument for his appointment. Brighton isn't just good at recruitment. They are consistently cited as operating one of the best, most efficient, and most profitable recruitment models in the world.
Right. They see talent acquisition as a science, not an art.
That's it, exactly.
But how does that Brighton model fundamentally differ from the traditional, perhaps more subjective model United has often relied on?
Oh, the differences are profound. In the traditional model, scouting often relies on personal networks, regional knowledge, and a subjective eye test. The Brighton model, which Macaulay was immersed in, relies heavily on data aggregation and specific profile matching.
So it's less about a scout saying, I like the look of this lad, and more about data.
Much more. They identify gaps in their squad and then use data, everything from physical metrics, passing volume, mental toughness indicators, tactical fit to find players globally who match that profile perfectly, regardless of current fame or price tag.
So they're essentially identifying market inefficiencies, players who are undervalued because traditional scouts haven't looked in that specific league or used that specific metrics.
Precisely. That's how they find the Caicedos and the Mintas of this world-high value, under-the-radar talent, acquired cheaply and sold for stratospheric profit after successful development.
And Macaulay would have intimate knowledge of the system.
He would. How the data team integrates with the scouting team, how they define player profiles, and crucially, the rigorous vetting process they employ. He brings that entire playbook with him.
But wait a minute. Is it realistic to think Macaulay can just port the Brighton model into the chaotic, high-pressure, high-spending structure of Manchester United?
That is the critical challenge.
Isn't that overlooking the fundamental difference in resources and pressure? Brighton is optimized to find profit. United is optimized to find instant generational success.
And that's a brilliant point. You can compare the Brighton model to a highly efficient Japanese railway system.
Yeah.
Every piece is optimized for efficiency and minimal waste. United, historically, has operated more like an American model. Throw vast sums of money at the problem until it moves, focusing on headline names rather than perfect synergy.
So Macaulay brings the methodology of the railway system.
But at United, he is being asked to use that method while surrounded by the constant pressure of a multi-billion-dollar budget and a global spotlight. The principles are transferable, but the environment is hostile to slow, measured, data-driven progress.
A fantastic analogy. Now, moving on to the next major section of his CV, Chelsea. This is where the debate becomes deeply polarizing.
Yes.
This reflects Macaulay's transition from the efficiency of Brighton to the massive spending spree post-Bowley takeover.
And the sources show how fans are completely split. Some defenders lump Chelsea in with Brighton, arguing Macaulay worked at two of the best clubs in terms of recruitment in the world, suggesting that even the Chelsea hires were structurally sound.
But the critics are far, far louder here. They point straight to the £2 billion spent since the Todd Bowley takeover and argue that Chelsea is perhaps the worst in world football for recruitment right now.
They're not wrong about the results. The results simply do not justify the outlay, and the club is miles away from challenging the top two.
So how do you defend his time there?
Well, we have to break down that £2 billion timeline to be fair to Macaulay.
Yeah.
This area is called out as one of the worst periods of recruitment in the PL, but the sources also provide a crucial counter-narrative.
Which is?
The defender's view suggests that the majority of the absolute worst, most chaotic recruitment happened in the first year, immediately post-takeover, when Todd Bowley was far too involved.
Right, when he was basically playing football manager for real.
Exactly. Seemingly buying players purely for status or a manager's preference without any cohesive strategic plan.
So the argument is that Macaulay's influence was limited during that initial frenzy and likely became more systematized as the structure settled, potentially minimizing his responsibility for the early failures.
Precisely. Furthermore, there's an intriguing defense of the nature of the spending, even if the results haven't materialized.
What do you mean?
Those defending the strategy argue that many of the transfers, while expensive, were low-risk moves on players that still have value.
The long contracts for young players.
Exactly. You think about the long contracts given to young talent. Even if they don't work out at Chelsea, they retain significant resale value. They're assets, not dead weight.
That is a key distinction. It's arguing the strategy was sound acquiring valuable assets, even if the coaching environment failed to maximize those assets.
And we also have the source context, which challenges the idea that Chelsea were total failures during that period. One comment points out that at the time of writing, they were second and 6 points off in November.
So the total disaster narrative might be a bit sensationalized.
It's used to argue just that Macaulay was part of a structure that was still identifying high-potential players, even if the on-pitch cohesion was lacking.
This careful dissection of the Chelsea period is crucial. It shows that his CV is not black and white. It is defined by the internal chaos he had to navigate. Which brings us to West Ham, an entirely different kind of chaos.
The West Ham spill is short, but it's immediately alarming for fans. When they search his name, they find an old article headline: Kyle Macaulay sacked, yet another failed recruitment project.
On the surface, that is a massive red flag.
A huge one.
But as always, context is king here. What does the fan analysis of the source material suggest about this sacking?
It suggests the headline was misleading, reflecting West Ham's institutional instability more than Macaulay's failure. He wasn't even there a year.
So what was the issue?
Well, West Ham historically has suffered from what sources describe as a hire-fire regime. Managers often demand the right to bring in their own recruiters, leading to constant turnover.
And there was interference from the top, right?
Absolutely. Internal interference from figures like David Sullivan is cited as a perpetual barrier to implementing any coherent, long-term recruitment strategy.
So he was likely caught in the crossfire of West Ham's messy internal politics, not necessarily performing poorly himself.
That's the consensus. The failed recruitment project mentioned was tied to fan frustration over the quick departures of the staff, not a judgment on his technical scouting ability.
And it confirms the trend. Macaulay thrives in highly structured environments like Brighton, but has been exposed to and survived extreme instability at West Ham and Chelsea.
Exactly.
And finally, the Graham Potter factor. This is the biggest red flag for critics. Macaulay has a long-standing connection, having worked with Graham Potter for years. Given Potter's failure at Chelsea, how much does that linkage damage Macaulay's reputation?
It creates a strong narrative link for critics. It's easy to say, if Potter failed and Macaulay was part of Potter's trusted team, then Macaulay must share in that failure.
Classic association bias.
It is. However, the counterpoint, which we must emphasize, is incredibly strong. Macaulay was not sacked immediately after Potter was dismissed at Chelsea.
The fact he was retained, that demonstrates his value was considered distinct from the coaching staff's ultimate failure.
Exactly. The decision-makers saw Macaulay as a valuable asset in the infrastructure, an expert in talent identification, regardless of the manager's tactical shortcomings.
So he wasn't just Potter's mate.
It suggests he wasn't. He wasn't simply a management mate following Potter from club to club, but a specialist whose input the new regime deemed worth keeping, despite the massive turnover. And that independent valuation is a huge positive sign for his appointment at Manchester United.
Okay, let's connect all these individual data points to the bigger picture at Manchester United now. This hire is fundamentally about signaling a new strategic shift under the expected full leadership of the new football operations hierarchy.
It is. But what we see in the fan reaction is profound skepticism about the nature of that shift.
Let's delve deeper into the strategic worries, especially regarding the talent pool being targeted. There's significant anxiety that the club is leaning too heavily towards domestic talent.
Familiar faces.
Familiar faces known within the English football structure.
This worry stems from a fear that the club is not targeting best-in-class outside of England for these crucial infrastructure roles. They see the leadership potentially being assembled, figures like Jason Wilcox, Vivell, and now Macaulay, as experts primarily rooted in the Premier League ecosystem.
And that could create an insular, risk-averse environment.
That's the fear.
And this lack of global ambition is a massive concern when fans compare United to their rivals, isn't it?
It is. Liverpool, under their prior successful structure, and City, under their current structure, are constantly targeting people from abroad for key infrastructural roles, bringing in diverse global expertise.
And that comparison brings the fear into sharp focus. Supporters worry that this domestic known quantity focus screams of risks like Murtough and go.
Ah, yes, the previous regime.
That previous regime was seen as being dominated by people familiar with the club, but perhaps lacking world-class strategic planning, and it set the club back years. The anxiety is that this new approach, though modern, could still be too narrow.
And that it could set the club back another 5 years by failing to attract truly elite global operational minds.
This discussion of domestic focus leads us directly into the intense scrutiny and accusations of cronyism revolving around the structure being built by Jason Wilcox. The sources show an almost obsessive focus on every connection between the new hires.
It's highly charged. The claim circulating among some frustrated fans is that literally every appointment we make is either one of his mates or that the runner-up candidate was a mate of Wilcox.
And that level of cynicism reflects a deep-seated belief that meritocracy has been sidelined at United, historically, in favor of familiar faces who are easy to control.
It does.
We must explore the specifics of this claim to understand why it gained such traction. A runner-up candidate, Ben Chorley, was mentioned prominently in the sources, leading to a massive debate over his relationship with Wilcox.
Right, and Chorley was linked to Southampton, where Wilcox previously worked. So the cynical narrative was immediately established. Wilcox is hiring a bunch of people he knows.
The old boys club.
Exactly. And Chorley, simply because he was associated with Southampton, was deemed part of that network. This fear, whether it's rational or not, is fueled by years of seeing former players or management figures return in non-meritocratic roles.
But the deeper analysis, the source counter-narrative, suggests that this specific link to Chorley is spurious.
It is. The sources clarified that Chorley was hired by Southampton after Wilcox had already left the club, meaning they likely never worked together.
A key detail.
A key detail? But one that's often lost in the noise of fan anxiety. The key takeaway here is not whether the cronyism is real, it's that the perception is incredibly strong, and the fan base is primed to reject any appointment that appears too safe or too familiar.
And there's another layer to the cynicism, isn't there? The theory that Macaulay was hired as an easy-to-fire bum.
This is perhaps the most revealing theory regarding the current level of fan distrust.
What's the thinking behind it?
The idea is that Macaulay is a placeholder, a convenient hire due to his availability and relative anonymity, specifically so that it is not suspicious before Wilcox can quietly bring in his actual preferred candidate 6 months or a year down the line.
So once the public pressure has eased.
Exactly. That view sees every decision as strategic, not for the club's benefit, but for the benefit of the management's internal maneuvering, the very difficult atmosphere for any new hire to succeed in.
Absolutely. And we must place Macaulay's arrival against the backdrop of significant internal staff movement, a true systemic churn that affects everything from the first team down to the youth ranks.
A true reorganization. The sources confirm it's happening at multiple levels, particularly in the academy.
We see that the head of academy recruitment, Luke Fedorenko, is leaving. That feels significant.
It is. The academy is traditionally United's proudest asset, and high-level churn there suggests the club is not just revamping the senior team, but the entire pipeline.
And the talent bleed is evident, fueling those rival comparisons. Liverpool, in particular, is capitalizing, reportedly in advanced talks, to appoint United Academy coach Simon Wiles as their U18s coach.
Losing development talent to a direct rival is a serious concern for continuity. It underscores the instability. When coaches and staff see a lack of cohesive vision or opportunity at their current club, they will naturally look towards successful rival structures.
But United is trying to reverse the flow, right? By engaging Alan Wright, a former Manchester City Academy coach?
They are. Hiring from City is a direct attempt to import the operational secrets of their most successful rival, which, slightly offsets the domestic cronyism accusations.
It shows they're looking for proven winners.
It does. It demonstrates an understanding that they need to bring in expertise from proven winning environments, wherever they may be. And finally, we see the familiar face of Darren Fletcher in talks to become the U18's lead coach.
An appointment that's a fascinating blend of the old and the new, a familiar figure given a new, structured role under the mandate of the new leadership.
It highlights the balance the new structure is attempting to strike, honoring the history and institutional knowledge with Fletcher, while importing modern expertise like Wright, Vivell, and Macaulay, and using external consultants like Sportsology to ensure impartiality.
So Macaulay's hiring is just the most visible tip of a massive, comprehensive iceberg of internal restructuring.
That's it.
So what does this all mean for the immediate future of Manchester United? We've established they are building a modern, highly structured recruitment mechanism, which is vital, yet the gravitational pull of the conversation always returns to the 90 minutes on the pitch.
This is the crux of the entire deep dive. It brings us back to that powerful, systemic observation found in the sources, perhaps the most critical insight for you to take away.
What's that?
The quote that says, "Every other player that leaves United to be a success, it's because they fit proper systems at their clubs, and we don't have that." It's that simple.
That quote is absolutely devastating because it suggests the problem isn't the raw talent of the players or even necessarily the scouts who find them.
Yeah.
It suggests the fundamental failure of the coaching, the tactical structure, and the culture to maximize that talent once it arrives.
Exactly. And this raises an important fundamental question. Can you fix a system-level failure purely by perfecting the structure that identifies talent?
No.
Macaulay is tasked with bringing in the right components. But if the engine, the tactical environment, the coaching quality, the cohesion of the team is faulty, those perfect components will still fail to produce the desired output.
It seems like United is building a state-of-the-art laboratory to discover a cure, but the patients are still dying because the hospital is structurally unsound.
That's a very accurate analogy. The hope, clearly linked to Macaulay's background, is that his insights from Brighton can help United find high-value, previously under-the-radar talent that fits specific, defined tactical needs.
They need a Caicedo.
They desperately need players who exceed expectations and price tags, mirroring that efficient Brighton model. But the inherent risk remains that they successfully scout a phenomenal player, someone who would thrive at a club like Liverpool or City, but the club structure never works out for them once they arrive at United.
And that risk is the shadow hanging over every single recruitment hire.
It is. The general fan disappointment over the fates of talented players who have failed to live up to their potential, players who were considered world-class before they arrived, is what generates that initial cynicism.
They fear Macaulay will do his job perfectly, only for the coaching and managerial environment to ruin the investment.
I think that's the core fear.
So we finish with a summary of incredibly divided opinion on Macaulay himself. He is either an excellent, highly rated analyst, bringing data-driven best practices from the successful models of modern football, ready to transform the club's efficiency.
Or he is viewed as too closely tied to managerial failure via Graham Potter, associated with the massively questionable recruitment period at Chelsea, and is merely a piece in a wider domestic-focused regime that critics feel lacks the necessary global ambition and ruthless meritocracy needed to challenge the true elite.
The fair anxiety is the price of past failures.
It is. The structural changes are necessary, yes, but the cynicism confirms that even when the club takes steps to fix the plumbing, the fans remain obsessed with the fact that the entire house still feels structurally unstable and prone to collapse at any moment.
So let's wrap up this deep dive into the engine room at Old Trafford. We've meticulously confirmed the key details of the Kyle Macaulay appointment as head of senior scouting, reporting into Christopher Vivell. We've broken down the complex, contradictory narrative of his CV, the operational brilliance he learned at Brighton, the financial chaos he navigated at Chelsea, and the institutional instability at West Ham. And we've highlighted the palpable, intense cynicism among the supporters.
Yeah, and the club is demonstrably addressing the structural deficiencies which fans have rightly demanded for years. They are bringing in expertise and modernizing their reporting lines under the mandate of a new hierarchy.
But is it enough?
Well, the ultimate success of this appointment won't be judged by how well Macaulay identifies talent on a database, nor by the cost-effectiveness of his finds. It will be judged entirely on the pitch.
Right.
It'll be judged by whether the players he identifies, the players they acquire, can actually perform that fundamental, simple 5-yard pass on a consistent basis under pressure.
That translation from paper to reliable performance is the final daunting hurdle.
Absolutely. And look, United is shoring up its infrastructure by hiring people connected to successful modern recruitment models. But given the deep-seated fan concern that talent only succeeds elsewhere due to proper systems, the crucial question for United isn't who scouts the next young gem.
So what is the crucial question?
The crucial question is who will be the next appointment? The coach, the tactical director, the figurehead, who finally delivers a comprehensive, cohesive playing system capable of maximizing that talent. Until that systemic flaw is fixed, every promising structural appointment, including Macaulay's, will carry the unnecessary risk of failure. That is the real challenge ahead for Manchester United.